welcome their students. Welcome to the 5th series of the architecture lectures, this year on Slovenian architecture. What should be said right at the beginning is that the project was made possible or supported using the public funding by the Slovak Arts Council. Now I would like to introduce our dear guest, architect Jurij Kobe. I would say one of the most famous and well-known Slovenian architects, representing the contemporary Slovenian architecture, not only inside of Slovenia, but in European context as well. Jurij Kobe is architect, is landscape architect, is set designer, scenographer, artist, so he's very, how to say, multifunctional person or multitasking person. On his studio, and he himself had realized something like 50 architectural works, among them many important interventions in historical buildings, many important public buildings, schools, theaters, museums, bridges, etc., etc., etc. So I would like to start now a little bit be more personal. Jurij, I'm very happy to have you online, and I'm very sad at the same time that you are not here with us in Bratislava, because if I remember well, you was the first Slovenian architect who had an exhibition here in Bratislava in the let's say beginning of this century. When I'm right, it was in the year 2000, and it was really a big success. And this was for the first time when the Slovak audience somehow realized how important the architecture of contemporary Slovenia could be also for us as an inspiration. So let me welcome you once again, and now the floor is yours. So please, you can start with your lecture, with your speech.
Henrietta, thank you. Thank you. Well, I must say I'm not so happy to have a lecture like in this way. So I would be very glad if we had more personal contact, not this kind of electro contact. And I'm also not very familiar with those apparatus, although, of course, I use it for drawing and for writing and so on and so on. But I think still personal contact and hand is very important. Well, first of all, what I wanted to say or to show you is kind of prende luce, prende ombra. It's a funny story. A few years ago, not few years, 20 years, but years ago, very quickly, I was invited by Italian friends to make an object on the theme La pietra e la luce, the stone and the light, and to participate with them, with the Squadra Italiana, in the famous Verona exhibition of stone. And my proposal, I was thinking about the question how to make in a more elementary and also most abstract way something that could represent my understanding of space, and a kind of spatial polygram came out that I called prende luce, prende ombra, or take the light and take the shadow. One word. This is 5 stone that I saw in the same size, but disposed to the light from different angles. So each slice of stone reflects the light differently. And with this object, I could measure, that could measure a few inches or be an architecture in the size of skyscraper, I wanted to demonstrate that different reflection of the same light somehow tells us about architecture. As the light becomes light only when projected on something, also architecture becomes architecture only with a dialogue with its surrounding. On very different question, it answers differently. The dialogue is therefore the essential element in defining one's identity. And further, the space among those slices does not end in the size of those slices, but extends broader in the direction of their open space. And so also the story of architecture that way does not end with the built object. The story of architecture remains also after the object is destroyed. That is, the story of architecture includes also all its past stories. If not, tant pis pour elle. Henrietta, on your last lecture, you jumped from Raunikar directly, as I understood, maybe I was wrong, to our generation, but you jumped over Jugovec, Kristel, Sever, Mihelic, that are very important also Raunikar students, from which we learned a lot. So, if we can go further, Luigi Pirandello said, we are not what we think we are, but more what the others think for us or of us. And Wolfgang Gottlieb Fichte said, I also am defined by not I. That means things are defined also by their opponents. What is also very much considered in, not only in architecture, in painting, in sculpture, in music, in dance. So let's go. I'm going the wrong way. University campus of Novo Mesto, it was a competition that actually never was realized. It was a competition and we didn't win, but I think it's very important work for our thinking or concerning architecture. It was situated on an abandoned military magazine of Yugoslav army, which left after 1990, and left actually very good preserved pavilions that are, as you said, as you can see, quite apart one of the other, because it was a military magazine, and you know, if one pavilion explodes, the other shouldn't explode with them. But we thought that it's quite interesting, as the buildings were very well preserved. They could serve as a beginning of growth of faculties, several different faculties. There is enough space around them so that they can grow, as you see, independently from one another in their own direction or in the space around them. And so actually the plan of military magazine served as a kind of scheme of planning the new university with different faculties in actually very beautiful surrounding. It was, of course, wood, as you saw on the pictures. This is kind of thinking of, I like actually renderings that leave some space also for imagination. Elementary school in Novo Mesto. You know, the project is a very old one. It's a project on the southern part of, again, Novo Mesto, spreading its wings to prevent the invading dwelling or building or of neighborhoods, not to invade the very beautiful valley, if you, as you see below this school building. The school building is composed of 3 parts. The central part housing the all common programs, that means the main hall, the entrance, main hall, access to the valley, and again also the spaces for teachers, and below all there's also a gymnasium. But the wings are shaped differently. On the left side, you see, following the slope, the wings are following in cascades, so that each class, this wing is meant to house the younger pupils, so that all pupils can have their own access to the natural greenery. And on the west side, that house the bigger pupils, of course, is shaped in more abstract and more functional block that is, of course, meant to light their curriculum in these spaces. This is entrance hall. Important element is also the arrangement of outer space that is using also local type of greenery. Here these pictures are very old. They are not green yet, but as you see, pergola is very popular here because it's a vine growing region, and of course with architecture we listen also to this part of using space. View from General Hall to the beautiful valley and spaces for younger pupils. It's a kind of summer and winter scenery. Secondary school for nurses in Ljubljana is a kind of conversation with the culture of a city. We called our competition entry the Palace, making specific reference to typology found within the urban fabric of Ljubljana. It refers the urban model of Austrian monarchy's systematic rationalization of public buildings such as post office, hospitals, barracks, and later also railway stations, schools, and so on, which were built all over the territory of monarchy in a way to provide identifiable form, so that the citizens going in those buildings actually identify themselves with the organization of society. So the form of building is alienation aligned around to the main road, quite heavy, with quite heavy traffic, but of course using the existing park of trees. These trees, as you see, are not well, this part and this part we plant later, but the greatest amount of trees that were planted, 88 trees for President Tito. And we use this form to, let's say, make a kind of entrance space for the building. But the building is so thin and long. Why? Because we wanted to leave as much as possible space for the school playground, because it's one of the most important spaces in all schools. Sorry. So this is the face of school, being also divided in 3 parts. The central part with all program, common program, library, entrance, lecture hall, and so on, and 2 wings with classes. This is nice atmosphere. Very transparent central part that also allow us to look through this central part to the schoolyard beyond. The facade towards the heavy traffic road actually references to Slovene architecture. You see on the left side famous Savin Sever using a secondary facade with very clever solution, because it's quite often that secondary facade provokes a problem of penetrating sound from one space in the building to the another, so that this this space between first facade and the second facade must be also divided if we don't want to have the same problem. See this, of course, our study of this glazing, double glazing. And here you see how also the gymnasium is incorporated in the thin corpse of the school, as I said already before, to prevent or to save as much as possible space for school playground. And here the span over the gymnasium actually is formed by the walls among the classes above. Of course, for everything, many sketches are made. This is already a bit grown greenery. The main lecture hall with some details, and some details with the tribune of the school courtyard. I present 3 open spaces in Ljubljana. We made quite a few, but let's say these 3 are very interesting or very different among each other. First is the park along a small creek, Gradaščica, hopefully or gladly abandoned area in the very vicinity of center of Ljubljana. We see here the entrance road to the center of Ljubljana, with a bridge in the upper level, the bridge that made us a bit problem because we already got the span calculated, so the span of the bridge was quite short, and the bridge is very bright, and so how to prolong the bridge, we made big wings just to adjust this bridge also to the park area that has different dimensions. So here we see this bridge in the night, and the pillars let the pillars speak about entering the central part of the city. We use a motive that Plečnik used very often, because this place was, that means these cascades, this place was very popular for washing laundry, of course, in past times. And Plečnik used it as a kind of architectural type or architectural modification of nature. And as the path under the bridge is quite unpleasant, so we made there a kind of attraction, a kind of theater under the bridge. Second one is called Špica. Špica is, maybe I forgot to tell before, that the park is organized actually listening to the fabric of urban fabric nearby. So it's very simple, very humbly modified, but few accents actually are accentuating this connection to the urban net also in the park. Second, called Špica, embarkment. Špica is conus, Špica, maybe you understand Špica as well, because this conus is made by bifurcation of Ljubljanica. It goes from the south to the two ways, Grubar-Jev canal channel, and this is the normal flow of the river. It is composed of two parts. One is slightly slope going down to Ljubljanica, and the other is serving as an embarkment for quite a few new boats that is now floating on Ljubljanica. The modification or the differentiation of the park, again, listen to the urban fabric, and of course the slope is formulated by cascades and partly also covered with wood, and the situation is really marvelous. So it was quite a wonder that it was abandoned for such a long time, but it was not abandoned 4,000 years before, because when starting to dig in this area, a big settlement of those settlements on pillars was discovered, so that we had to modify the modulation of relief, because of course those pillars shouldn't be uncovered. They are still resting there. Some of these are of course preserved in museum, but this preservation is very costly, and because of wood being in water for so long time, doesn't resist the touching the air. Of course, some elements are also present here. This is a kind of bigger pergola serving as an open-air museum or exposition area for the visitors of the park. The other part, that means the embankment, is shaped in very small, steep cascades, because of course the river goes up and down, and it is all moving up and down, and is kind of a great city plaza in summertime. This is a kind of night atmosphere. And the last one is Butcher's Bridge, Mesarski most, and Petkovskovo Nabrežje, Petkovšek embankment. Mesarski most and Petkovšek embankment. Mesarski most is a part of central town market place. It's a very popular place, not only for buying food, but also for meeting, for chatting, and of course on Saturdays everyone should be here and everyone should meet everyone. The bridge is situated in the gap of very well-known Plečnik's colonnade, that it's colonnade in front of the very long building of for butcher shop. That's why the bridge is called Butcher's Bridge. Also, already Plečnik planted a bridge here, but only 10 years ago there was a competition, and we were happy to win this competition, and we wanted to that of course I must not forget that the brief of the competition was that the bridge must be very bright, because it is kind of prolongation or of city market, of market square, and it is very important also because underneath there is a quite a dense program. It's an embankment for river traffic. It's a public lavatory. It's entrance to the garage that is planned. It's also opened space for the bar here, smaller restaurant here. So also the lower part of the lower level of the bridge is very important. So you can see how bright is this bridge. It's really actually nearly as bright as long. And because of the story of butchers on the part where it meets Petkovskovo Nabrežje, Petkovšek's embankment, and our sculptor Jakob Berder made a sculpture of course. No, I'll Prometheus. I'm sorry. Words go out But because this bridge is so bright, we made the both sides of the bridge in, of course, this is a part of lower level of the bridge, and you see we planted also poplar trees. It's in Plečnik arrangement of these poplar trees were removed because of construction of the bridge, but now, of course, in this picture, these poplars are still very young, but now they are quite becoming bigger and bigger. Glass roof, of course, is kind of attraction and joke. Here we see our sculpture. He made also quite a few small jokes on the fence of bridge. So the Petkošek embankment was actually, I mean, the plan was actually very simple. We only had to arrange the quite abandoned area suitable to the bars and the restaurants along the new formed embankment, and of course they exploded in a minute after the construction finished. As I said, it was very simple, the arrangement of it. The only thing that we wanted to do, but did not succeed, was to make cascades up to the river bank, the very river bank. And we were not allowed because of those officers in preservation office didn't want to do it. It's still a painful experience. So the only accent of our arrangement in this, let's say, refurbishing the Petkošek embankment were two terraces that are made exactly on the vis-a-vis of Plečnik's pavilions or tempietos, breaking the long building of butchers building. And nice atmosphere. In Maribor, we were also lucky to win the competition for arranging actually performing complex in the minority bound minority monastery, sorry. It's on the southeast corner of the center city of Maribor, and the monastery was abandoned by law of Joseph II because he closed many of monasteries around the Austria. And so was the story of this one. So it was in a very, very bad condition, but the puppet theater wanted their lodging and their work in this abandoned structure. And of course, this abandoned structure was that way also saved. The scheme was to put all the small program of a theater in existing structure and to put all functional, vitally functional program in the opened atrium of this monastery. So you see it here in the section that all this big program, that is flight tower, stage, and all workshops that is used in theaters are placed in this atrium, including the roof is carried by this flight tower, so that the roof does not touch. Actually, it touches, but does not lean on the existing structure. There is quite a clever detail, as you see, because the roof, being kind of console, is also moving, and you must calculate how to design this touch of the new roof of the theater and the new roof or the roof of the existing structure. But there is also another actually embarrassment in puppet theaters, namely puppets can be very small, can be up to 1 decimeter, but they can be also 3 meters high. And how to adjust the adequate atmosphere, adequate space for this type of performances, the different type of performances. So we invented a kind of a movable wall, we call it. A movable wall which contains all those light and sound cabins, and also hosts first serves as a magazine for seats. So this movable wall can be really moving towards the stage, also leaving all the space of monastery atrium free for a special type of performances. So this is the stage, or the main hall as it is functional, as we were not allowed to make acoustic panels on the facades. The acoustic panels are only on the roof and the shutters of windows. Here you can see it's quite a complicated construction, and very thick. And here you see, let's say, back side of this movable wall. We also didn't want to, also for the other spaces in this theater, we didn't want to touch the existing walls or ceilings. So it's everything very carefully designed, how to touch, because this touch is very important. These are wardrobes, lavatory, and entrance. some details, some preserved ceiling, special lights, everything not to touch the existing walls, the existing structure, because there were no light. There was no light in history in this picture. I mean, no fixed lights. Also, the very technical spaces, all installations are in actually detached construction. There is also some spaces when you approach the wall of the cellar from outside. And this is the wall from outside that is preserved. So, details are every time important. And as I already said, on the other side of the fly tower, there is outer space with about 600 seats, and all the machinery is situated on the roof that also expands, and on this cabin being situated on this kind of flying atmosphere. The very important piece or element of the theater is, of course, bar that is open during performances, but should be also closed during times out of season. The third element of this performance area is a church that was really abandoned and transformed in the several types of functional spaces, so that actually nothing was preserved. And our task was actually to clean it and to refurbish it as much as possible into its original shape. These are measurements that were made, and the church has its upper, or let's say parterre level, and a small entry from the cellar of monastery. But of course, as it is always very interesting in refurbishing old constructions, the excavations revealed actually whole cellar of this church, and in this cellar there were foundations of Romanesque church from 12th century, sorry. And this it became, of course, special space for performances, for exhibitions, and with, of course, special intimate atmosphere. So that the church actually got new level. This is the upper level, actually cleaned and prepared for performances, and the lower level with the remains of Romanesque foundation of Romanesque church. So in this level you can actually see all layers of time, layer of Baroque, of Romanesque, and upper the Baroque. And of course, how to make this plate, the construction of this new parterre. We made a plate, concrete plate, that does not touch the original structure, but this includes all heating and ventilating facilities with this only corpse. So from above you can see actually the upper floor through this gap. Partly the upper floor has, of course, openings that you can see the lower floor. Some details. Again, everything avoiding direct touch of the new to the old. And as every time there are new discoveries and the new Gothic entrance was discovered. So at the end, actually, we were already finishing the project, finishing the construction. This new entrance was discovered. You can see how actually time is merciless, and the Baroque opening didn't want to think about what was in the past. So this is now the entrance of all stages of time in actually one side of one big fire. Opening performance, and there are plenty of. Refurbishing the opera house in Ljubljana is, I hope I'm not so long. What's the time? No.
You are just perfect. You are not so long. Please continue.
Opera house is very typical for Slovene circumstances. We had first, of course, decision that the National Theatre will be built. This was in the end of 19th century, and first project was project of famous Filmer and Filmer from in the famous Austrian pair of architects that made several theaters all over the Austria or Austro-Hungarian Empire. But of course it was too large and too costly. And then came Hruby and Hraski, Czech architects that made a smaller one, a more humbly construction. And again, it was too costly. And then we ended with a really very humble theater house in Ljubljana, lacking spaces for performance because the stage is very small, lacking the space for public where to be during the pauses, during the breaks, and where the performances or the actors can change their clothes. Actually, nothing was here, no rehearsal halls, and so on. And finally, there was an international competition, and we were happy to win, but the restrictions were quite strict, so we could not go out of these lines of the old theater. And so we arranged these spaces for performance, cleaning all spaces in former, let's say, stage area. We prolonged the building to make in lower, in parterre niveau, entrance and backstage. Of course, this backstage goes also down, and spaces for wardrobes, for all counselors and so on the sides of this central space. And because we cannot move anyway outside, the space for public during the breaks we found under the existing parterre of existing house. So here you can see how big actually was this new restructuration and new refurbishment of this building. Here you see the backstage, the entrance, and then rehearsal halls in the central part, and of course in this section. I don't have it. It's in this section the new spaces for public during the pauses, and also as a new entrance with the ticket office, with spaces for publicity and so on, lavatories and everything that goes with public access. Forming two atriums that actually this denivellation makes a bit less harmless, less harmed. So, of course, when this structure began, there was quite a revolt, because really the new addition was quite brutal, but it was really very necessary, so that everybody working now in the opera house is very happy. Here you can see how works the enlightenment or for rehearsal. So it's a very simple solution, but all the technical stuff or technical things like heating, ventilation, and so is incorporated in this part of the ceiling or part of the roof. This is these are two of I think this is for orchestra and this is for ballet. You can see the atmosphere of corridors that are very narrow, and we were very much concerned how this very narrow performances serve. These are a bit better, changing room for actors. And again, very important was this second glazing. Here still more than in offices, and so because every wardrobe is also serving as a kind of rehearsal for singers, so that of course the voice mustn't go from the below to the upper level. So it's this kind of second glazing is constructed like you see in this detail. Important is, as I say every time, is the touch between old and new, and I think these gaps are very important, and in this gap there is of course elevator. This is part of for visitors. Under the parterre, you can see two atriums. This artery towards the center of the city is a ticket office and public relations and spaces for publicity. The other one is space for opera cellar, a restaurant that is obligatory, but is still not done. Of course, several sketches were made how to make new spaces under the parterre, but still spaces that can be a bit adjusted to the atmosphere of fin de siècle opera. The works were very Egyptian in a way, you can imagine, and this is how it looks today. Also, the other parts of opera were very nicely restored. So you can see before and later with the discovered frescoes and so. This is one of atrium facing the main, one of main streets in the center. See the final look. We were again happy to be able to make quite a new center in a very nice but small city, Radovljica, in northwest part of Slovenia. Of course, you can see here badly at the Alps. It's actually in the foot of the Alps. Of course, because the space is very fragile, we entered with studying the structure, the net, the tiny urban net, and we wanted to approach it as harmless as possible. So we had this task to make actually new center of the city with the main square that is lining the main road entering the city center. One facade of the square are these apartment buildings with the of course public parterre. The southern part is a library and the northern part is a cultural center, opening also one side of the stage to the new formed square. Here you can see that. Well, after the first phase of concept, we divided these apartment buildings among other architects. We took this central one, and us, because being apartment block, we wanted to approach to the love of flowers in the balconies. So the preliminary studies were how to make space for flowers on the facade. So this is the final model, and actually ground floor, it's public and big restaurant, and upper levels are, of course, dwellings. And what I want to stress here, the only thing I want to stress is that we endeavored very much that you enter the dining area as you enter the dwelling, because it's not the case every time. Very often you enter a dwelling passing all other rooms before reaching it. This is final view without flowers, some spaces. And then the library, being very actually ascetic, very there was not enough space for it, never enough. We made one and then another, and again it was full. So it's very abstract, very rational, but still you have some spaces that are interesting in this building, parterre opening to the square, allowing mainly children to play also in less favorable conditions, and of course rooftop with the terrace, study of facade that can, let's say, evoke kind of foliage of leaves. This is the outer look. And an office and the upper level with access to the terrace. Of course, the cultural center is still in dreams, waiting for better times. You can see this opening of the main stage, also opening to the square. I will show you also a very funny project. It's an east in a new, cannot say neighborhood, new settlement in Ljubljana with, let's say, normal blocks and our not normal block. It was, this is the very funny squadra. 4 teachers of the Ljubljana faculty were asked to join and to make their visions in a block that will be called experimental block. So we were allowed to experiment with all things you can imagine in building areas. So with the structure, with the type of dwelling, with the type of ventilation, heating, and so on. And all began quite interesting. We were quite far with this, our project in preliminary phase. But when coming to executional phase, the investor came to be a more, he was actually afraid of customers of that can come with their lawyers and of course demand exact dimensions of certain spaces in dwelling that are not normal, let's say corridors less than 120 centimeters, but because in this way the dining room can be bigger for 30 centimeters and so on. So that in the end it is a funny building, more, let's say, designed than really experimental. But the wish was very good, and maybe next step or next experimental block will be more experimental. I didn't present. Aleš Vodopivec, Janez Koželj, Tadej Glažar, and the execution guy, and me. Here you can see how the section, very interesting, because the block was simply divided. Aleš Vodopivec, Tadej Glažar, Janez Koželj, Jurij Kobe. It's in slices, like a sausage. So you can see very, very different dwellings, from very small ones, a bigger and the biggest, in various compositions. But these are only floor plans. Then, of course, you must count that in some dwellings, let's say, ventilation was really different. Heating was also different, but actually the dimensions of spaces were quite standard. This is a very humble and very intimate refurbishment of a structure that was only left in bigger, very good landscaped environment of very sad story. A sad story, as I said, is because in various countries of Europe, as in our country, there was a problem of collaboration with the aggressors, Italians and Germans and Hungarians. Of course, the side of nation that came to the side of aggressor, of course, made also bad things. And this is only a preserved cellar with a very simple construction, cellar of a bigger building, cellar where victims that were collaborators, or not, that was those who came against the collaborators and against the aggressors. They were tortured and finally killed. The museum was very, actually the theme of the museum is very sober, tatas on the upper level, and simply places where they were tortured in the cellar. Of course, we tried to say that something is being held in this construction that is already old in a new way, so that these metal nets are a bit bigger than necessary. The net against, of course, cats and birds, and of course against those who want to enter without being allowed. The sober data and illustrations are exposed on upper level, and this lower level, the cellars, were only artificially enlightened, and the door wings were changed. They are now metal, and they are now bearing the names and portraits of victims, and they are too big to be closed. Funny story. We are happy to win the competition for a bridge and 2 parks in Ljubljana, bridge connecting 2 neighborhoods from 70s, one from 70s, one from 80s, that have been till now separated by Ljubljanica, that is in this part already very bright, more than twice as it is in city center. Actually, the brief of the competition wanted the atmosphere, presented a kind of adventure in this space. Actually, I'm not so young, but I didn't enter a competition demanding adventure atmosphere. With the brief, with the bridge, and 2 small pops. Small squares. So we tried to make this adventure atmosphere simply by the structure of the bridge. The bridge is, of course, porting a span. This span is 70 meters, a kind of arch that is, of course, connected with the lower level of bridge, lower level serving pedestrian promenade and cycling path that should be separated. And so pedestrian promenade in the lower level is also enlarged by the space under the arch, which can also be used as, of course, an adventure for younger or for adults. Here you see the atmosphere of the bridge and surrounding. The bigger square program has a kind of a pavilion with restaurant, small restaurant, spaces for local community, spaces for restrooms for bus drivers, because here the public traffic makes kind of return. And of course, some space for skating and the gathering abroad under the bigger roof of this pavilion. This is small. Again, rendering that leaves space for imagination. The smaller square is connected with its program to the surrounding, because this is a park with public planting, public orchard, and so also the square is dedicated to small plants that will be kind of playground for children or learning ground for children. Thank you. Are you still listening?
Jurij, thank you. Yes, we are still there.
Or you are sleeping? Hello?
Now you can see us. We are not sleeping, we are still here. Thank you very much. It was really exciting to hear about all your recent projects, because I was not familiar with all of them. So thank you for updating our knowledge about your work. If you are still able to communicate with the screen of your computer.
Yeah. Okay.
So there could be perhaps a place for a few questions from our side.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, dear students, now you are also allowed to ask questions, so please use this opportunity. And as usually, I will start with my question, because actually it was evident as you went through your projects that you always include this idea to give a kind of additional value in the form of public space in all of the projects we have seen. And once you stated in one interview that I will quote it. It was in Piranesi magazine, and you said that I have never differentiated between the open and closed spaces. Architecture is about designing spaces. Okay, so I understand that space is important for you, but how would you explain this special, feature about including this public into your projects? Is it a kind of Mediterranean tradition, or is it a kind of your interest for such a scenography?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a specific Mediterranean, or I don't know, Alpanian that is very important for me. It is simply because you cannot exclude. You cannot. I don't know if I was clean enough with the explanation of my first project that was actually not a project but was a kind of sculpture. But with this sculpture, I wanted to explain how important is for me this being aware that the project you are doing is not alone, that it is in connection with everything that comes around. And I don't know, as simple as that.
Okay, so it's about communicating with surroundings and communicating with people and with the context that's there. Speaking about culture, speaking about city, about nature, about everything. Yeah? Okay. Dear students, some questions from your side. If not, we will continue to ask, because we are quite curious with Monica. Okay, there is a question from one of our students, so I don't know if you can read it, Yuri, but if not, then I read it for you.
Yeah, please.
So, Mariana asks, I would like to ask if it is difficult to get the right new spirit into an old building, and what do you most often inspire in your work projects? What are you inspired by?
Well, I hope I got the point. Of course, any act and is inputting also new spirit. And with this, we must be very careful, because, of course, it is, for me, obvious that I cannot act as, let's say, the architect before me acted. It is every time a kind of dialogue. But I must actually imagine what would be his answer if I ask him how to do it. But there is also me, although he has rights because he's already there. But it is also me that I'm forced to do things so that people who come to the, let's say, new refurbished atmosphere, new refurbished space, they should know what was original and what is new. I think it's very important, because it's a kind of ethic in architecture that is very important. Was I clear?
Yes, I think so. I hope that you've been clear also for Mariana. Yes, she writes, thank you very much. Yes, Monica.
Okay, hello Yuri. Maybe I would like to ask, also in the name of all our students, that because you've done all this amazing work, like your portfolio is full of built projects, but if you imagine that you would be just graduated right now, you would be in your 30 years, let's say, what would be your advice to architects that just begin their work? Like, would you do something differently, or would you advise them to take the same path, or can you just imagine, like, one thing?
I would say school is very good, and I would suggest to join a kind of good architecture for first 5 years at least, because there are things that you cannot learn alone. And all those who say that they are actually self-teaching, they forgot that they got knowledge from the others. And I wouldn't underestimate the wisdom of those who had some way behind them. So I would suggest, as I was drawing for, I think, 3 or 4 architects, although I also had my own way as a student already, but still, besides working alone, I was entering other bureaus and working for them, because it's very important.
Just to add that you've been the student of Edward Ravnikar, so you get the best possible lectures.
But also besides Ravnikar, I was working for younger architects, and I learned a lot from them.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I would also like to add something to your artistic side, because as we saw on many of your projects, you always start with very fine sketches done by hand, not by computer. And at the beginning of your lecture, you stated that you are not that good friend with computers. So how it is when you design? Do you use this computer facilities, or do you work in kind of ArchiCAD or I don't know what, or you are only drawing by hand and then you have people who are doing the projects on computers?
Well, of course, computer is a tool, and it is modern tool, and it is efficient and so on. But drawing with hand, it is. I wrote an article in Oris with this for this.
This is why I'm asking, because I saw the article.
Yeah. No, well, now I say to the students, when drawing with the hand, you actually do not control the hand completely. The hand goes also its own way. And it is very important that this way of a hand is leading also your brain. It goes actually about the quick connection between brain and hand without being aware of what are you doing. And that's why hand drawing is very important. It is very important also, what I didn't write, that when you are drawing exactly, well, not exactly as computer, you are having a kind of space in your mind, because the computer actually wants that you know where you are coming. You have 2 points and you come from one point to the other point. And when you are drawing with the hand, you actually don't know that this point exists. And that's something that is very important, because there are plenty of solutions that can be reached by your free hand.
Oh, yes, we have one more question. Thank you, and I will read the next question for you. How often do you move away from the original vision of the project during the creation process?
Well, it's not every time the same. Sometimes, of course, sometimes the solution just comes. But there are also solutions that are developing more and more, and actually, well, it is not that the beginning is completely different, or still, I can remember that some beginnings were really different from the results in the end. But it's not kind of a rule. I cannot say this.
Because I just develop a little bit the question, because in some of the projects that you have shown us today, there was a competition, I don't know, perhaps 10 years or 15 years ago, and then the project fell asleep, and it was, how to say, evoked later. I don't know, perhaps 5 or 6 years later. So, and you kept the same idea, or because after so many years, perhaps you are in a different position, your attitude could be a little bit different than it was a few years ago. So in these cases, perhaps it's natural that the idea is somehow it's changed.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It happens very much with those architects who change their attitude very often, and who modify their buildings according to time. I'm afraid about this. Well, I admit that the development of a project is something that is relevant, but the development must be really based on rethinking of the circumstances and I mean development including changes. That means rethinking of circumstances and other things. But otherwise, I think that, of course, the project develops. Project does not change.
Thank you.
That's nice. Thank you. We have another question by student Karina. She says, greetings, Mr. Kobe, your work is very sensitive to the surroundings. Could you describe us how do you work with the landscape? Do you include it to your proposal, or is it built on cooperation with a landscape architect?
Well, of course, we cooperate with landscape architects, but still, well, I think as I do not separate buildings and nature and landscaping, I'm very much involved in landscaping in all projects. So,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We hope it was enough for Karina, but we have another question.
yeah.
By Lenka. She's asking about Slovenians as clients. Are they open-minded, or do you need to persuade them about your projects?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a difficult question, and it is also can be also sad story. But of course, if I'm strong enough in my persuasion, in my arguments, I'm normally successful. But of course, it happened also sad thing, and in this way, I'm not very happy. No?
Okay. And I would like also to ask such a difficult question regarding the contemporary Slovenian architecture. How happy you are with the general state of the architecture scene in Slovenia?
Sorry? Once more.
This question touches the contemporary situation in architecture in Slovenia. If you are happy with the state of art, about the, I don't know, not only about the clients and about the competitions, but also about the idea of the Slovenian architecture, about the continuity or tradition or consistency in the ideas of Slovenian architects, and if you would call it Slovenian architecture, what happened now in Slovenia, or is it a cosmopolitan architecture without any specific features? You are in a position that you can talk about this, because you are I must say you are the oldest from our guests in this series, so I mean that you are allowed to comment on such a question.
To reflect.
Yes, you are allowed to reflect.
Yeah. Well, I understood the question very well, and I will be quite direct. I think that this era of liberalismus changed also quite a lot in architecture. Of course, I appreciate very much some younger architects in Slovenia. that will be also performing their work in your series. But there are, that I'm saying sadly, this liberalismus entered also to school, to our School of Architecture. And many of architects actually are victims of this type of thinking on architectural product. And this is the bad side of it. Although I must say there are some that are, I won't say names, but there are some that are brilliant and very well doing.
Okay, thank you. It was really not direct, but more indirect, but I can understand. We have
also direct. Direct.
Okay, we have a next question from Matusz, yes. How much do you think architecture is about the architect, his personality? Should it reflect his thoughts, or should it be more objective?
I didn't get you, sorry. Understand you.
How much do you think architecture is about the architect, about his personality, and if the architecture should reflect the thoughts of the architect, or if it should be more objective? Not
well, I got you. I think it should be also of architecture, because you actually are asked to say your answer, and this answer must be also personal, and this answer must be also how to say, responsible to the matter you are dealing with, so that kind of objective architecture for me does not exist. Although it serves, of course, it must function. We are making also competitions and buildings with very sober program, and the program must function. It's the architecture that prevails, that is actually too much of expression. It's for me not an architecture, but still you must put in every sober or every rational scheme, you must put your heart, and this should be kind of seen.
Thank you. Another student, Mate, is saying, thank you for the presentation. During the presentation, I was pleased to see that you worked with sculptures on several projects. I have noticed that in modern architecture, this kind of collaboration between the architects and the sculptures is unfortunately much less than it used to be. What do you think? What is the reason? Will this kind of collaboration between the architect and the sculpture disappear in the future?
Very nice question. I agree completely, but I think this is one type of this liberalismus that is actually modifying a kind of egoism, and architects are very often close to architecture. I personally, I'm a friend of several artists, painters, sculptors, musicians, and I think it's very important for an architect that goes deeply in sculpture, in music, in dance, because it forms your thinking about simple space. That was the answer.
But do you have any idea what could strengthen this collaboration? Because it's true that we don't see it often anymore.
Yeah, architect is a person who actually orchestrates the let's say construction of a building or construction of a landscape, or and any composer or any director of an orchestra is evoking some instrument, or it is not evoking some instrument. That's the question. Is the question of architect, because there will not be a sculptor or a painter coming to architect and saying, let me build me a kind of envelope for my for my sculpture, or yeah, it's emballage for my sculpture. It should be kind of going together.
So when you were designing the bridge in Ljubljana, the pedestrian one, did you have the feeling that something was missing, that you needed to have these sculptures added to it to make it complete?
Not at all. Not at all. There were several buildings that I draw the, let's say, the idea of something staying there, or not a physical idea, maybe also a kind of abstract idea, but the idea was there. It's a part of the whole.
Yeah, it comes from the very beginning of the project, that you somehow think about the sculpture and about this, how you call it, about, it's another a kind of addition, it's an integral part of the project when you work with sculpture. Am I right? Or perhaps I was not that clear. I only saw that in your, I feel it like that in your work, the sculpture is not an addition that comes ex post after the process of the design, but it comes from the very beginning, that you
yeah, exactly,
in your vision, that it's from the beginning it's there. But anyway, I think we now speak only about the sculpture as a artistic or as a piece of art which is included in the architecture. But I have in mind also, or we can speak also about this other possibility of cooperation, which was so common in 60s, for example, when architects used to work with sculptures as partners, that they actually designed the space or the form together, and this might be even more exciting.
That's very nice addition, and I'm actually appreciating very much those times of actually everything. This 60s, 50s, 30s were very, very fruitful, and we should learn very much from those times still.
Yeah, I mean, the architects, they should come out from their offices, and they should speak more with other artists and not only with clients.
Exactly.
But actually, this is our, we teachers and the faculties of architecture or the schools of architecture, this is our, how to say, we should learn, or we should teach students to do this, because this is actually the academia, this is the field where you can learn to work in such collaborations. When you are in practice, it's somehow more difficult.
Yeah.
Anyway. We still have some more questions, so but
maybe the last one.
Not the last, but one of the last.
One of the last questions. Alex is asking how important it is to read books about architecture. Or is it better to get real practice, go to work in architectural bureau and gain the experience? Probably both of them.
No, I would say it's very important question. I would say it's very important to read books about architecture, but I mean books about architecture, not listen or looking at the picture in reviews. That is now the very often habit of architects. Reading books is very important, but it is important also reading novels, reading everything. As I said, going to expositions, to art exposition, being interested in painting, in music, in films. So that's something that now art is more engaged in contemporary problems than architecture, I think, and that's the problem.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the result of this liberalism, or this neoliberalism, that architects are occupied only with paid projects, and they have less time to invest the energy and the time to public matters.
to get engaged.
Yeah, exactly.
With the current problems of society.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there some more questions? If not, then
say goodbye. And there is one more.
There is one more question. So you cannot go.
So the very last one, and then we let you go. Marco would like to ask, how do Slovenian architects solved with the big change when socialism fell and modern era of architecture of Western countries came? So basically, the change of the political regime and its influence on architecture.
Yeah, very good question, and I think I answered already before. The liberalism brought very bad things also to our environment. It's we are using environment. We are not, let's say, living with the environment. And let me put very simple example. In 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, we built so-called neighborhoods. Neighborhoods was a group of buildings for, let's say, 5,000 inhabitants, with school, with kindergarten, with shops, and that is very important, with such a certain amount of greenery. Today, we use the land, as much as possible. So the density is growing, and it is, let's say, doing bad thing. And this move from socialism, especially, I will say, not our socialism was really different from the other socialisms in the world. This move to liberalism, in this case, it's not very good.
Okay, we have the last statement from our students, and this is thank you. So, I mean, Yuri, now you are free. Thank you very much for the wonderful lecture and for all these great ideas that you shared with us. I was really impressed, and I hope that our students as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you to invite me. Sorry.
We just cannot simulate the applause that you would get.
Yes, but we will
about 80 students that watched your lecture, so I hope that everybody is clapping.
And we have had also some people watching you on social media, so it's not only about students but also about public and about some architects, Slovak architects. So we are very happy that it was so successful, and congratulations and thank you to join us.
And next time it will be right.
Yes, and we hope very much that you will visit Bratislava soon after these obstacles that we have. So thank you and
bye.
Bye.
Bye.